Good morning, everybody.
Hey, Beth, how are you?
I'm well, sir. Thank you. How about you?
Tired, but good, thank you.
Good morning.
Morning, Chairman.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Morning. I can move that.
All right, folks, why don't we get started here? Good morning. It's John Neerman. It's my pleasure to call this work session of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality to order. Today is Thursday, June 11th, 2020. The time is 9:30 a.m. And let me begin with sort of apologies up front and caveats about technology. I know we're all learning and adapting, and in some cases, like my own case, struggling a little bit. I've had the same problem that Toby identified a moment ago, where my computer will periodically decide to log me out. So if I disappear, I will probably return pretty quickly. So, thanks everyone for bearing with us as we, practice with the technology. So with that, let me begin with a modified video roll call. Commissioner Lindley, I see you. Good morning.
Good morning.
And I can hear you too. That's good. Commissioner Janeka, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. So our commissioners are all present. And how about our general counsel, Ms. Smith, are you on the line?
I am on the line. Good morning.
Good morning. And our public interest counsel, good morning, Mr. McWhorter.
Good morning, Chairman.
And Director Baker, I see you. Good morning again.
Good morning.
And Ms. Smith, do we have any interested persons signed in to speak?
No, we don't have anyone signed in.
Okay, and registration is now closed on that. So what I'd like to do is share some opening thoughts about the return to work plan, and then give my fellow commissioners the same opportunity. But Ms. Smith, why don't we go ahead and call the first item, and then the commissioners can give their initial comments before turning it over to Toby.
So item number 1 is the discussion of agency guidance for staff returning to office work and discussion of agency successes and lessons learned from full-scale teleworking.
So here's my perspective, and I appreciate that I'm just one of 3 commissioners, but this is my view. And let's begin with the virus. It has killed more than 1,800 Texans. It has taken well over 100,000 lives across the United States. Globally, it's claimed more than 400,000 lives. We don't have a vaccine. We don't have a proven treatment. The virus continues to kill. In the past couple of days, there's been reporting about record levels of hospitalizations in Texas, and a report that EPA Region 6 has delayed a planned reopening due to increasing infections in Dallas. So we've got to be careful, and we can't become complacent. Sheltering in place has no doubt saved a lot of lives and a lot of suffering, but it is a really blunt measure, and it comes with steep social and economic costs. So while nothing about the virus has changed, our public and private sectors are adapting their response to the virus to reduce the social and economic toll. And that means lifting lockdowns and reopening to varying degrees. And to do that with an acceptable measure of safety, our communities have to implement appropriate risk mitigation strategies. And TCQ's guidance on returning to the workplace is meant to support that. But in my mind, for TCQ, the right question is not how to return to the workplace. At least that's not the first question. The overarching question is how to deliver for our fellow Texans on our responsibility to help protect public health and the environment. So the right verb is serving, not so much returning. How do we serve? And fortunately, we've discovered that we can meet most of our agency's obligations to serve our fellow Texans while working remotely. And let me just pause and thank our outstanding staff again for how effectively they were able to do and quickly they were able to adapt and transition to a remote working posture. But fortunately, most of us can be effective without being in our offices. And if that describes you, it's my expectation that you won't return to the workplace. So my unofficial subtitle for the return to office plan is don't return to the office, because that's what it should be at this point for most of you. Again, many of you have heard me say this before, this agency wasn't designed for a pandemic, and there are a handful of agency functions that are particularly challenging from a pandemic safety perspective. For example, how does the agency support long-term water quality planning work if that requires 2 employees to be in a boat taking samples together? Or how do we administer occupational testing where there are practical and legal barriers to remote testing? And we're still learning how to safely fill these gaps in our services. And because of the wide variety of work functions and the wide variety of workspaces that we have at this agency, our managers and supervisors are going to have to tailor how we fill these gaps to their particular teams. And sometimes managers and supervisors are going to have to work together with other managers and supervisors where they share workspaces. And again, the return to office plan is meant to support that. So I appreciate that there are a lot of different perspectives. Really, first, just about what this virus means and what the risk is, and some of that is based on our particular situations. What is our family situation? Do we have? Are we living with people at high risk? Some of it just comes down to personality. You know, do we have a high risk tolerance or a low risk tolerance? And all of that's legitimate. It's going to fall across the spectrum. And so I'm really eager to hear my fellow commissioners' view on this. But my advice to our managers would be that we move deliberately, incrementally, carefully, that we layer multiple mitigation tactics, that we prioritize gap filling, and at this point continue to restrict access to the workplace consistent with the return to office plan, but also accept as it is truly necessary to serve our fellow Texans. So, colleagues, I'm going to hand this over to you in a moment, but let me tee up a question for Toby so he can address this in his comments. And Toby, I'd like to hear a high-level status report on our operations, as well as to hear about remaining gaps in our services, just to provide a context for this conversation. And specifically as to gaps, I'd like to hear what the agency's top priorities are from a public health standpoint and an environmental protection standpoint. And with that, Commissioner Lindley, let me hand the mic over to you.
Thanks. Good morning. I don't have too many comments to share. You said a lot of good things, and I by and large agree. You know, probably the only 3 things I'll say is, one, I don't think we can ever give enough kudos to people and that have adjusted so well, our employees that have adjusted so well working from home. OAS deserves a huge round of applause for getting us up and running just in a technical and physical sense, I guess is the way to say it. I'm very impressed with all of us in OAS, and I know with they have a lot of things going on this summer. Getting us up and running with CAPS and a pandemic on top of that has to be so much. And so OAS deserves a lot of credit. Kelly Cook and his folks also deserve a lot of credit. Can't go through all the people that deserve a lot of credit. Really say thanks to those two, that OAS office and Kelly Cook's division. You know, one thing I've said kind of to some outside groups, and I just to kind of say it here today, is one thing that's important to me that I want to make sure isn't happening is a delay in anything that needs to get done. And what I mean by that is, you know, I hear conversations out there, whether it's related to TCEQ or other things in life that says, well, once we're back open, we'll go do that. And what I've told people is don't use the excuse of TCQ office to either come meet with us or to come talk to us about stuff you have going on. Because what I don't want to happen is people to say, well, we haven't been able to get in there to talk to them. And so whether it's related to a permit or a, grant, or an enforcement action, I don't want all that to be pushed on a back burner so that one day when we are, open to the public again, then we're just slammed. And there are so many ways for us to meet with the outside world, the people that we are regulating. We need to take advantage of those. And anyone in the regulatory world is listening right now, I'd encourage you to please meet with us now. Don't delay. If there are things that we need to be hearing from you on, talking to you about, do it. Let's not wait. It's a lot more enjoyable to have a lot of meetings that we have with outside folks in person. I get that. I would much rather do my work in person. I'd much rather do agenda in person. I'd much rather be doing this work session in person. But this is maybe the new norm for a while, maybe for a really long time. We don't know. And so let's just all get on board with the fact that this might be how we need to meet for a while. And so let's take advantage of the resources we have electronically and get it done if we need to do it so that things don't get, pushed down the road and delayed. One comment I've had, and I've been trying to brainstorm and I haven't come up with the best idea yet, so I'm open to suggestions, is I have not really ever liked the word gap when we talk about the services that we are providing. And I've mentioned that once or twice. It's been a little while since I've mentioned it, but hearing you say it a minute ago, I thought, oh, yep, he's sitting on that little sensitive spot for me. Because I'm scared someone's going to take that word and turn it into something that's not the true meaning. Because we are still fulfilling our role. We are still, making sure human health is protected and the environment. And so I know we have a document we're going to be talking about in a little bit or walking through and hearing more about called Regulatory Gaps. And I would like for us to see that name change. And I should be coming with a firm title of what I want, but I only have suggestions because I haven't been the one working on the document. So, to be fair, the people that have been working on it are the ones that should have the most say in my mind. But I think more of a word of, how are we restructuring during the pandemic, or how are we accommodating during the pandemic? Something along those lines, because I just think the word gap can have a connotation that isn't correct and might make it sound like the agency, is lacking in certain areas. And I don't believe we are. And so I just don't want to give anyone the wrong impression with the word gap. And I might be hypersensitive. I might be the only person that has that opinion, but I do just want to say that. And the last thing I'll say is I agree that we need to be very deliberate in how we reopen. And, and when I say reopen, I mean the office reopen, because we've been open and we've been up and running, and we've gotten, I don't know about you two gentlemen, but I've received a lot of praise even this week about how permitting has gone and enforcement has gone, and how impressed people have been with how this agency, even though we're not designed to operate in a pandemic, has continued to work. And so I do want to be deliberate and smart about it. But I know I don't know if we'll get to it much today. I know the executive director side of the house is working on it, about how we are going to reopen to the public, because that one is that's just hard. But we need, at some point, if we're not going to get into it today, that's fine. I know they're working on a plan, but we are going to need to probably, I feel like that's our next big hurdle. The agency, by and large, is running pretty well. There's a few things that we need to, accommodate during this pandemic, but we need to figure out how to open to the public, and I think that's a really difficult one. And we're not the only state agency in that boat. And so, I know Toby and others are very good about talking to other agencies and seeing what they're doing. Just knowing that we're not, we're one agency in the state of Texas, but it might be good to talk to our brother and sister agencies and see how they're handling it, because we're all in the same boat. So that was a lot more than I thought I was going to say, but I'm going to stop there.
Well, Commissioner Lindley, it's very well said, I thought, and thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, so if anybody's under the impression that this agency is not fully open for business, let me join you in saying gap either. I don't have any suggestions for a better word. I think the point is just to, focus on making sure that we're adapting to the pandemic in a way that continues to provide all the services to the people of the state that we need to be providing. Commissioner
Yeah,
Ginecka,
and honestly, I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I agree. I don't think there are gaps. I just don't want people to take that word and run with it. And even what you just said sounds really nice to me, because that's the truth. What we're doing is accommodating, the regulatory world in a pandemic, and maybe that's the guidance document. It's just a little comment, just a little thought I had. Anyway, I will stop.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to chime in too. We need to understand it in context, and so Toby's going to address that, I think, in a little bit. But Commissioner Ginecka, let me hand it over to you.
Well, I didn't realize there was so much sensitivity around the word gap, but I think that's a point well made from both of y'all, and I certainly join your calls for wanting to caution the public and all of our colleagues and workers and the stakeholders who work with that in industry from jumping to the conclusion that gaps are shortfalls. But, if you're a commuter in and around London right now, that's not right now, but back when life was normal, the common phrase is mind the gap when you're in and around the underground, when you're going around the metro there. And I think that's just something that's important for us to continue to do, is where our services have had to take alternative postures. I'm glad that we are taking a very forward-looking approach and trying to make sure we're thoughtfully unraveling that. But I do just want to encourage all of us, all the TCEQ employees who may be watching right now or may watch this later, any of the members in the industry, any of our friends out in the public who often are quick to try to call us and keep us in the direction that you may want our agency and our state to be moving in. Please just try to have a little added patience, a little added benefit of the doubt for all of your fellow Texans and the other residents and visitors who are coming in and working and interacting with our state. I think we all need a little extra understanding right now, and that's both from the regulated entities we work with who may be facing exceptional crises, and they're following our process to seek relief in that immediate need. But I think there's just as much of a need on the other side, where the public has to interact with us and continue to interact. If we're receiving requests for extensions to give comment, or if we're hearing from members of the public where they're facing similar crises, I certainly don't want this to be a blank check. Everyone gets every concern pushed aside until we're back open again. And exactly as Commissioner Lindley cautioned, that's just a recipe for disaster down the road. I'm never in favor of trying to kick the can down on any problem. And so to that end, I'd love for everyone to try to continue getting as much work as you can do, but when you can't, raise that flag and bring it to our agency's attention, because I think I'm confident seeing all the good work that has gone into this return to office plan, the efforts from top to bottom of the agency to remain open and remain responsive to all the unique needs that have come up during this past 3 months. I'm confident that we are, and the agency across the board is trying to give full consideration to every request for relief from whichever direction it's coming. But it's so easy to jump 2 or 3 steps down the road, and we all just need to, those PSAs recently that we've seen come out from the governor's office, or in coordination with the governor's office, George Strait, Nolan Ryan, I think that really hits the right note that we're all missing these days, which is, Texas is a friendship state. Let's try to be a little more friendly with each other and a little more patient. But to that end, I'm eager to dig into some of the specifics on this and hear back from everyone across the agency. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ginecka. With that, why don't we turn it over to our Executive Director. Toby, the floor is yours.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for putting this work session together. I think it's a great opportunity for us to tell the story of TCEQ and sort of what we've been through for the last several months. And I can assure you that the agency is continuing to work based on my level of exhaustion right now. But I want to start by, I think on behalf of my office and I think all of the employees here at the agency, by just thanking y'all for your leadership this. In a lot of the events that we deal with, there's, as you all know, sort of a firewall between the commission and what we can do over here and the discussions that we can have. But y'all have been so involved in having conversations with me and our leadership in trying to help us work through this. It's been very helpful. And I really appreciate your commitment to the safety of the employees that we have. It's really set the tone, and it's I think from our perspective, it made it easy to make decisions that are good for the agency, which ultimately help us fulfill our mission by having a safe workforce. So thank you for that, and thank you for just wanting to move the agency safely forward. As a executive director, I now had the privilege of responding to man-made, natural, and biological disasters. And of all of you guys, I think we could write a book on disaster response at the end of this, when you guys aren't commissioners and we can all talk, can all talk to one another. But in some ways, this one has been the most challenging. The other ones that we've dealt with, they hit and they might last for a week. They may last for 2 weeks or a month. But I think the thing that's challenging about this one is that it goes on and on and on. And there's so many different facets to it that I know I'm personally dealing with, but I think every one of our employees is dealing with, from life at home with kids or elderly, or even our employees who live alone, and what that means as far as social distancing goes and not getting to come to the office. There's so many challenges with this that we've never really had to deal with before, and this is our first go at it. So I'd like to go back in time and really kind of run through the timeline of how we got here, because Kelly Cook and I yesterday were emailing back and forth about what the timeline looked like. And when, as Kelly always does, had a timeline ready to go, and as I went through it, I honestly got more exhausted just reading it. And it was illuminating to see how much we've had to do and go through to get to the point we are today. So I'm just going to go through a few points so I can sort of drive home that we've been at this for a while now. Going back all the way to January 21st, that's when the first COVID-19 case was reported in the United States, and it was in Washington, if you remember. We started having our daily updates at TCEQ on January 28th. On January 30th, right after that, the World Health Organization declared the COVID-19 outbreak a public health emergency concern. At that point, we dusted off our pandemic influenza continuity of operations plan and the TCEQ H1N1 addendum that was also part of that, and started to review to be, in the right position if it got worse. And obviously, as we all know, it got worse. On January 31st, the U.S. Human Services declared COVID-19 a public health emergency. On February 11th, we attended a situational awareness meeting for state agency emergency management representatives meeting at the SOC. February 21st, we were deep in the throes of trying to figure out what to do with medical waste, and we ultimately got a guidance document on how to handle waste related to COVID-19. February 27th, we attended COVID-19 briefing with the governor's office, and then another briefing with the governor in the SOC right on the heels of that. March 4th, we had the first positive case in the state of Texas. March 5th, we put out our first state email to the staff. We put flyers across the campus Hand sanitizer was made available. We enhanced daily cleaning for building and custodial staff. OAS put together leave and attendance guidance for managers. And OCE provided regulatory guidance to our regional offices. March 6th, our COVID-19 response team was formed to ensure that we were ready to go. And I'm skipping a lot of stuff in between some of these. Like, this is detailed, but just know it gets way more detailed. And I'm happy to share this with you guys when this is all said and done. On March 11th, WHO declares COVID-19 a global pandemic. March 13th, commissioners are briefed on COVID-19, and President Trump declared COVID-19 pandemic a national emergency. Governor Abbott issued a disaster declaration, and on that day, we issued a state email announcing telework plans that would begin March 16th. On the 15th, we confirmed that March 16th would be a transition day, and telework was to begin. And if you remember at that time, part of what drove that is we were having multiple employees that had contact with someone who was possibly positive, and we were spending an incredible amount of time shutting down floors of buildings, doing deep cleaning, trying to sort of one-off all of those, and it became almost it became unwieldy, and it was tough to keep up with, and so we moved to the teleworking pretty quickly after that. Teleworking started on March 16th. You know, one of the things that we did, canceled trade fair this year. So commissioners, you got a pass on sitting on the stage for, several hours. March 23rd, we closed agency buildings to the public, and we had our first positive exposure on the Park 35 campus. On March 31st, the governor issued an emergency order extending the minimizing of non-essential activities and school closures through May 4th. And on April 1st, we extended telework and granting of emergency leave indefinitely. At that point, everybody, we didn't have many people at the office. And so things transitioned quickly into online meetings, phone calls, conference calls. And one of the things early, and I give Chairman Neerman credit for this, was asking about regulatory, challenges that we were experiencing. And we started the process of trying to catalog what those regulatory challenges were and how we would respond to them. And the great thing about starting that early is that really informed how we're approaching our return to the office plan. It goes all the way back to that original document. On the heels of that, I give Commissioner Lindley credit for this, was starting to identify efficiencies that we had in the agency that were coming out of practice of teleworking. And so we were sort of building this regulatory challenge document, but then also in real time, what are the efficiencies that we're gaining and finding through this process. And then I do give Commissioner Ginecca out. At the same time, he was doing online meetings face-to-face with employees all across the state, which I think from a morale standpoint was incredibly helpful and insightful for me, because he was able to come back and tell me what he was hearing from everyone who he had conversations with. We started transitioning into hurricane season, and working with our NDOW Natural Disaster Operational Work Group partners, we were able to put together a health and safety plan, which lines out how Unified Command will respond safely should a storm affect Texas during the pandemic. And that, I know that's item 2, so we'll table that for the time being, but we'll come back to that. On May 28th, we completed the return to office plan, and on May 29th, we sent out an estate email announcing that to the agency. And on June 1st, that plan was put in place and had sort of a soft return to the office policy then, with the idea being that we would ramp up and hopefully be kind of hitting on all cylinders by the 15th, which is next week. That being said, I want to echo some things, and this is for make sure that the employees that are out there paying attention and watching right now, echoing sort of what the chairman said. The first line in the governor's reopening Texas plan is essentially, if you can work from home, work from home. And that is what we're doing as an agency. If our employees can meet their performance measures and efficiently work from home, we are asking them to continue to do that. The return to the office plan is really built on the idea of identifying those regulatory challenges way back when, and then trying to get people in a meaningful and safe way to address those things that are core functions of our agency. So Kelly Cook's going to talk specifically about the return to the office plan when I get done, and so I'm going to table that for the time being, but I want the employees out there to hear that that really is the idea behind that plan. I'm also going to table the successes. L'Oreal and Ramiro are going to hit come back to the successes at the end of this. And so what I want to really hit on quickly is, I guess there's 5 high-level lessons learned that I want to hit on. And then, Chairman, I'll try to address, I think, the question that you asked. And then some of the points that Commissioner Lindley brought up as far as opening to the public. So from the first lesson learned, and I already knew this because I've experienced it multiple times, TCEQ is really, really good at being nimble and being responsive. And I'm continually surprised, I shouldn't be at this point, at our ability to adapt to really tough working situations, whether it's a ITC fire, a TPC fire, a Hurricane Harvey, or in this case, COVID-19. It's amazing how our staff gets sort of marching orders, and then they don't need to be micromanaged. They go out and they just get it done. And it's very, very encouraging for me. And I want the staff to hear this as well. There are 2 things that came up. The first is that when I was on briefings with the governor's office on different occasions, and on one of those phone calls, the agency that got highlighted as continuing operating while in a telework scenario was TCEQ. To every other state agency in the state on that phone call, and I want our employees to hear that because I wasn't expecting that to come up, and it was just a note that was made on the phone call. The second thing, and this really gets more to the return to the office plan, is I was told by another entity just last week when I was with the governor at a hurricane briefing that they took our return to the office plan and they're using it as a model for their agency or for their entity. So, and I think that speaks to the quality of the type of work that this agency produces. The second thing is lessons learned is that I think we will see a shift in technology for the agency for the foreseeable future. I think this is a watershed moment that whether we like it or not, it was sort of this grand experiment we were thrown into. And very early in the process, we recognized the utility of laptops. And Kelly and her team were able to deploy, I think, 550 additional laptops over the course of this pandemic. And I know the comptroller's office has already done something like this. And I think what you'll see from here on out is a move towards a more mobile workforce that can work really from anywhere. And so we will, as we're doing technology refreshes and those sorts of things, we will focus heavily on the idea of creating a mobile workforce. The next is the deployment of cell phones. One of the challenges that we've had as an agency is not everyone has an agency cell phone. And we deployed a number of cell phones that people can check out so they don't have to use personal phones that are potentially subject to PIRs. And so if they have agency phones, that gives them some additional protection and comfort in doing agency work from home. Some challenges there. We learned that some of our employees don't have internet at home, so we had to deploy hotspots as well for some of those employees. But I'll tell you the biggest, from a technology standpoint, I think the biggest tool that we've learned how to use through this is Microsoft Teams. Out of all the platforms that are available, whether it be GoToMeeting, Zoom, Skype, Microsoft Teams has been a game changer for us as far as allowing staff to actually collaborate on documents and work on documents over face-to-face. That tool in itself, I think, will be part of this agency for the foreseeable future. And I plan on exploiting that new technology as much as we can. The next lesson learned is really, I think we've had a watershed moment as far as just our process, how we process documents, the way we get signatures on things, the way we take documents in, the way we get stuff out. Those processes, in many cases, were very antiquated. And I think this really exposed, in my mind, a lot of those inefficiencies. And so we were able to move to things like DocuSign. Chairman, I think you've heard about this, which has been very helpful. We've really utilized email in a whole different manner. And one of the things that's really interesting about that, the feedback that I'm getting from our frontline folks, is that email is becoming more efficient, and part of the reason for that is that people aren't distracted by having to leave and go to meetings, so they can actually respond to email in almost real time. And I can tell you from a personal standpoint, I rarely use email when I'm in the office because I just go get in front of people or pick up the phone, and my email use has gone up dramatically. And some people would say I still don't use email enough, but I think that theme is something that we've seen across the agency. The way we do meetings has changed, and we will continue to use virtual meetings. We save an incredible amount of time on a daily basis, not having to walk across the agency or gather in a conference room. So we will use things like that going forward to become more efficient. I know we will in my office. I'll go back and highlight Microsoft Teams again. The sharing of documents, the ability to work real time together there has been a game changer. But the thing that's been really interesting to me, I think we all know that sort of stuff would happen, but I think where I've been a little surprised and pleased is we've been able to even shift some of our investigations to an electronic format. So for example, PSC investigations, we're actually able to use photos and videos where our investigators ask for specific angles and photos and things that they can see. And we get that stuff back, and they've been able to actually complete those from their desk, which is not something, I think we always assumed you had to go out into the field for that. Another, our Tier 2 reports, our investigations regarding Tier 2, we found that we've been able to do all of those from the desk and not have to go out into the field. So I think what we're going to see is a shift there where we're going to get much more efficient in how we do those things. We're not going to have people out in the field nearly as much to complete some of our core functions from a compliance and enforcement standpoint, which I think is reduces risk on so many levels, whether it's getting into a vehicle, getting on site, or just leaving the office. So that's really been, I think, a surprise for me to see the ability to do that. The fourth thing that high level lessons learned is that teleworking works. And again, we sort of were forced into this grand experiment, and what I found is that while we may have stumbled a little bit at the beginning of this, it's just people trying to get out of the office, get organized, but once we sort of got things in place and things were moving, this agency has not missed a beat. We have been responsive. We have fulfilled our mission. And so it's leading me to some interesting ideas with regards to teleworking. We will be revisiting our OPPs for teleworking and trying to figure out how to make those easier. So if people want to telework going forward, we're going to find a way for them to do that. I've heard and read over and over again about morale and how this has actually boosted morale, but the interesting thing is that it's also boosted our efficiency. By moving everything to these electronic formats, we have example after example after example where we're saving 2 days here, saving 3 days there. And so that all, when you put that all that together, if people want to telework and they can be efficient doing it, I think that as an agency, we need to move to that. And I'll go back to a conversation I had with Commissioner Lindley. One of the things we've talked about is if we could get, and I'm going to focus specifically on the Austin campus right now, but if we could get to a point where we could get enough of our employees teleworking in a meaningful way, just a reminder, Building F is not a state-owned building. We're in a lease with this building. I think we're probably in this lease until 2024 at least. But I think the cost, and Kelly, you may have to jump in here. I think it's about $3.5 million a year that we pay for this building. We have about 650 employees in this building. But as I'm looking down the road, one of the things that I think is a worthy conversation to have is, are we able to shift enough of our employees to a teleworking posture that we're able to actually get out of this building and reconfigure our other buildings and create enough workspace for our employees here? So that's sort of a pie in the sky discussion to have as we move forward. But I think that's definitely something that we'll be looking at, and so you can expect more along those lines. And then 5, the lessons learned goes to it's really probably involves the commission and the legislature more than it involves our side. I think we can help inform on some of these things, but what we learned is that some of our statutes, maybe some of our rules, aren't necessarily built for responding to a pandemic and working in the posture that we're currently in. And I think that we've put some things in place to address that. And I'm happy with the way those processes are going. But ultimately, I think that the legislature is going to have to weigh in on some of these things, and so working through what that list might be during the summer to get prepared for the next legislative session is something that we'll be focusing on as well. Because I think that at the beginning of this, there were definitely some challenges that we had to address and work through. So that y'all can expect some future conversations along those lines, and we'll be working closely, obviously, with Aaron's team to make sure that we get those teed up correctly. As far, Chairman, getting to your question about the top 3 priorities, as far as the return to the office plan goes and where we are focused, I will tell you my number 1 priority, because I think it actually informs everything else that we do, is employee safety. If we can't provide safety to our employees, a safe working environment, a place where they feel comfortable coming to work, then we can't fulfill the rest of our mission. And I think the other key points of our mission are protecting the environment while sustaining the economy. And so for me, number one, without a doubt, is really focusing on the safety of our employees. And I think this is where the return to the office plan maybe gets a little challenging, and we've already seen this in the sense that we're going to have to continue to be nimble. We just recently closed the Beaumont office for a day because of a possible exposure there, and we had to have the office cleaned. We just had to do the same thing for the lab in Sugar Land, which we're trying to bring back up. And so so we're going to have to address those on case-by-case basis as they come up. But going above and beyond to try to protect our employees so we can do our other things is by far the first priority that I have in my mind. The second priority is responding to emergencies, complaints, and performing investigations. I think those really get to the heart of us being on the forefront of serving the state of Texas. And if you go through the regulatory challenge analysis, what you'll see in there is, I think, systematically plans in place to address all of those things. So that are date specific. So if you go through there, you could see, July 1st, we'll have certain investigators back in the field. Some where it's been challenging or some of the overnight investigations, because as you know, travel's been fairly restricted. And so that's been something that we're really focused on, is making sure that we can reach out and get to every place in the state of Texas that we need to get to. But if you look at the overall investigation picture, I think what we found is that we're down maybe less than 10% from where we were at this time last year. So I'm pretty happy with that. I would like to continue to get better at it, but that's really where we're focusing on those investigations that may require a little travel is where I'm going to be spending some time. And then I think it really gets to the question of protecting the environment. I think the last one, I'll go back to our mission, is sustaining the economy. And this really gets to your question, Commissioner Lindley, as well. I think part of that is we have to continue to move forward, and part of that is reopening to the public. So we do not have a plan for reopening to the public at this point, but that is once we put the return to office plan in place. I told Kelly Cook, let's focus on this, let's get it going, let's make sure that we can operate and we can get people in, we can do it safely. As soon as I feel good about that, then we will be all in on trying to come up with how to put parameters in place to safely allow the public into our offices. Because the interesting thing is that we actually do a lot of work face-to-face, and people do come into the offices. They need records. They need to be able to go to the repositories and get whatever they need. And sorry, Chairman, I just got logged out. Hold on.
I can still hear you.
I will speak to. I love that our IT department is so safe that they put these things on our laptops to make sure it locks. So in case I leave it in a coffee shop somewhere or something, nobody can get on and see, but I need a pandemic button where I can hit it and it just suspends that for a little while.
We all need a pandemic button.
So the next piece is really how do we meaningfully put the plan in place to re-engage with the public, whether that's through our public meetings that currently we're still doing that through virtual platforms. How do we do that in a safe way? Because in some cases may not be able to engage electronically. And then obviously, how do we get people face-to-face back in the office on an as-needed basis? And so those are the three things that I'm really focused on: employee safety, finishing out that small dip we've seen in investigations, especially the ones that require some travel, and then finally a meaningful plan to re-engage with the public. I think that was And then as far as reopening to the public, Commissioner Lindley, your idea of just made some notes while you were talking earlier. Brainstorming with our sister agencies is absolutely something that we will do. And so as this moves forward, I'll reach out to the agencies that are built a little more like us to have those conversations. Admittedly, I have not had that had those conversations yet. So so that's a lot that I kind of just unloaded on y'all. We can either take questions now, or I can pass it off to Kelly Cook. So he's actually going to focus on the return to the office plan and maybe some of the context behind that creation. But I'll defer to what you guys, whichever you want to take.
Why don't we go in reverse order? Commissioner Ginecka, any comments or questions at this point?
I don't think I have any particular questions to respond to the points on your lessons learned as well as those priorities. Toby, I really appreciate that, and thank you for that. I think that's absolutely aligns with where I've been perceiving the needs of the agency to be as it's going. So I'm just I remain very, very pleased and confident in how your focus has been on the right notes as we've tried to meet very disparate and at times contradictory calls and demands on our times and efforts and resources. So I think I agree with you. The safety of the employees really should be paramount in terms of being able to continue that mission. And if we fall victim to getting caught up in the immediate short-term needs that may cause us to make, weigh tough decisions and err on the side of putting more of our employees or more of the members of the public at risk, we may find ourselves down the road significantly more compromised in our ability to continue to do that mission. This is, in many extents, this is a marathon and not a sprint. So I commend you on that decision right off the bat. But I'll hold off on further questions until we dig into the details of the plan.
Thank you, Commissioner Lindley. Any thoughts, questions?
One comment, well, two, I guess. I will just say that I love pie in the sky. I am on board with the idea of getting us out of this commercial lease. And I don't want to pick agency, but I feel fairly confident saying that TFC would really appreciate us getting out of this commercial lease as well. So I know our contract, I think you said 2024 is when it ends. I mean, I would love go ahead.
Sorry, it doesn't, I don't think it ends then, but I think that's when we can start to have the conversation from the,
okay.
I'm not splitting of hairs here, but.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to get us out as soon as possible because that's a lot of money saved. And while there's money you have to pay to get out of a contract, I still think the long run save us money. That said, I also know there's more logistics than I could even imagine to take that would be in order to get us out of this building and have our staff able to work in other buildings. And so I think it would be awesome. I know it's going to take some time, but I do think it's a lofty goal, but I think it's attainable. And so I will commit to doing whatever I can to help. Kelly Linden, I meant to call you as soon as I hung up the phone telling Toby this wild idea and just apologize to you because I know it's your shop that will have a lot of work to do. If it's not doable, it's not doable, but I have a hard time seeing, I don't know. If we can get this many employees teleworking to get us out of this building, I think it's something we need to shoot for. So I'm very, very supportive of that long-term goal. And then I just had this thought while you were talking. I'd probably plan on saying it later, but I'm just going to say it now in case I don't remember. The agency has done an awesome deep dive into finding efficiencies and maybe changing the way we do some things because of what we discovered and learned about ourselves during this time of teleworking. And what I've kind of said to one or two groups out there, but I would say to anyone listening, and I think we can have a structured conversation later as far as truly seeking engagement on efficiencies, is hearing from the regulated community what they have seen, outside looking in as far as efficiencies. I think there are some things that they would comment on have worked really well and would like to see continue. There might be some things that we think have worked really well, but then when we hear from the people that we actually regulate, they say that actually, didn't work because of X, Y, and Z. And so, we might need to come into a middle ground on that. But I do think we need to, and this isn't right off the bat, but because we need to do other things first, like the return to the office plan, getting open to the public. But we do need to have engaged, I think, stakeholder, I don't know if it's meetings or town halls like these or whatever it might be, where we say, here's what we found out about ourselves, but you, as the people that we regulate, what did y'all observe, and see if there are more efficiencies we can come to, because I've heard stories of some sort of report, and I couldn't tell you if it's monthly or quarterly or what, but the people have to submit to us, and forever they've done it via hard copy, and now they have a way to just email it in, and it's so much more efficient. It's faster, and so just little things like that. If there's a number of those that we can get used to doing, we should do it. So I love that we've looked internally ourselves, but eventually we're going to need to open up that door. And there might be some things that we get people are critical of us on, but we can deal with that. But hear from the regulated community what they found as far as efficiencies or not efficiencies. And with that, I'm done. But thank you very much. Everything's gone really well. Appreciate everything you said.
Thank you, Commissioner Lindley. Appreciate your comments, especially around efficiency. I mean, we really need to be focused on that. As to statutory or regulatory changes, I know that there are some barriers there that don't need to be there. If they are purely regulatory and within our statutory authority to make those changes, please don't hesitate. Let's tee them up, open rulemakings, and improve the processes. For those that do need a statutory change, let's get them on a list and put them in front of the legislature this coming session. This is the first time, for those of you who don't know, that Commissioner Lindley and Commissioner Ginecca and I have gotten to say word one about the pandemic. We've had several agenda meetings where we discuss the items on the agenda. So this is wonderful for me to hear your thoughts and ideas. And I think this work session itself is a great resource and a great historical document. So, Toby, if you think it's appropriate, I think we should consider providing a link to the video archives for this work session on our COVID response website as a resource to the public. I think it probably also makes sense, because we're going to have some interest in it, to publish the timeline that you were reading from earlier, or some version of that that documents sort of the history of this event at the agency and what the agency has done to respond to it, as well as, and I think we've settled on a better word now, as well as the regulatory challenges document. So that to the extent the public is interested, they can understand what our challenges are and what we're doing to meet those challenges. And I have a few questions, and this is really looking forward to the presentations that are going to be made, and I'll just flag them so maybe the presenters can hit them in their comments, and there are a variety of things. DocuSign and wet signatures, is that something that we're definitely going to be able to continue to do post-pandemic, or we'd like to do it and are looking into it? That's one question. For our employees, what does the fall look like? If our kids are not back in school, or they're only back in school part-time, how do our employees who are also parents of school-age children juggle that and deal with that? And then thinking about the layering of mitigation efforts to reduce the risk, what is the role of testing? Are we advising our employees to be tested for the antibodies or the actual disease? So conclude my comments for now, and we can continue on with your presentation.
Great. So let me address. I'll do 2 of these, and then I'll leave the testing question to really Kelly Cook. I think that I think high level testing wise, if you feel like you need to get tested, you need to go get tested. I mean, I'll just leave it at that. I think in the city of Austin, I saw something that the city may be providing free testing. I think it's really kind of mirrored with the protesting that's going on. It's sort of lined up with that, but I don't know. I'd have to do some research to see if that's open to everyone or sort of how that works. As far as the DocuSign and the wet signatures, Chairman, we're going to do everything we can to continue that process. We're going to, wherever we can continue it, we will. I think, some of it may be, I have to really go in and go rule by rule and see what's required. But if possible, we will continue that in every way we can. And then, what does the fall look like? This is I'm echoing on mine. Are you guys hearing that echo?
I don't hear the echo, but you have a little bit of a delay, and the sound quality isn't perfect, but you're coming through well enough from my perspective.
It may the internet connection is running a little slow. So for me, what does the fall look like? So let me just, for the employees out there, I'm one of the folks in the agency that has 2 school-age children, 2 boys, 7 and 9, who have not been in school for way too long now. And so this is, obviously something that I'm going to have to deal with. My spouse works, and so, as we think through the possibility that school may not return in the fall, I hope that it does. But, I'm not the one who's ultimately making that decision. As we think through that possibility, I think as an agency, we will have a lot of grace for employees that are in that position. And we will continue working with our employees to make sure that they can take care of their children and they can take care of their home front as needed. There's an old saying, something I really, really believe in, that if things aren't good on the home front, it's really hard to have things good at the office. And so we will do everything we can to build, to keep our processes in place where folks can feel comfortable balancing those different responsibilities that they're going to have. And it may be continuing to, do online school come the fall, and then figuring out how you balance that with the office. For me, one of the things that was really interesting is that I ended up saving somewhere between 2 and 2.5 hours a day from my commute. So I was able to really kind of work with the boys for their online schooling, but then still get my work done. So because I gained all that time of not having to sit in the car. So I think there are some things where we become more efficient by working from home, and we will continue to address that and make sure that our employees and their kids are taken care of this coming fall. So with that, I'll stop, and I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Cook, and he's going to, and let me just kind of talk through from our perspective, commissioners. I was going to have Kelly Cook really kind of talk about the return to the office plan, put some context around that, and then have Kelly Kill-Linden talk about more of the HR side of things, and maybe the development of some of the tools that they did. And then finish with Lori Allen Ramiro really talking about the successes. And we have all of the deputies sort of spread out through the fourth floor of Building F. So we're being safe right now. So if you want to dive in with, so if you have a specific question about air or a specific question about legal services, they're here and they're ready to dive into those if they need to. They're not going to be on video, but they are here and able to do that if you have questions beyond what Ramiro and L'Oreal are going to talk about. And then we'll finish there, and then we'll go to item 2, which is really the disaster preparedness piece, which is wrapped into all this, but it's a separate, topic on the caption. Put that towards. So with that, I'll stop and I'll turn it over to Kelly Cook to take it from here. Commissioner Jim.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to take the opportunity as unquestionably the little kid of the 3 commissioners, the one most tech savvy, I guess. Reminded everybody, let's all try to mute our microphones unless we're wearing headphones like Kelly, Miss Linden is. We just keep it muted so that we don't create an echo when your speakers hit the microphone on your laptop. I know a lot of the agency laptops are outstanding for ability to use our technology, but I get tripped up on it. So I'll reminder to myself, I'll be muting myself now. Thanks.
And
Perfect.
I'm also
All right.
going to chime in.
Sorry, go ahead.
I need like a 3-minute break. So if that's okay, 3, 5, whatever's easiest. I'll be right back, but I'm going to
Why
take a
don't
break.
we recess? I have 10:36. Why don't we reconvene at 10:40?
Great.
See y'all at 10:40.
Perfect.
All right, can you hear me? Megan?
Yes, ma'am, I can.
I'm gonna hang up the phone. Hold on. Okay, can you hear me through the
Yes.
web thing?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, it's still on. Okay, what about now?
I can still hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Bye-bye.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm gonna unmute mine once once you get started.
Okay.
All right. I see that we're back. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great. Well, we're back after a short recess. I see that all three commissioners are present. We've got a quorum, so let's continue on. Time's 10:41.
Thank you, Chairman, Commissioners, Toby. Good morning. My name is Kelly Cook. I'm the director for the TCEQ's Critical Infrastructure Division. I'm here to talk to you this morning about the agency's return to office plan, the process for the development and implementation for that plan. I want to start off first by saying that the creation and development of this plan was really a collaborative effort across the agency. There's truly a lot of teamwork involved, and I think that's what helped us develop a really, really good plan. So a big thank you to everybody that took part in that effort. Your efforts, I think, really paid off. We began working on the plan in mid-April. The plan was completed and finalized May 28th, and then it's been posted up on our internal COVID SharePoint site as of June 1st, 2020. I'm going to go through some of the key planning elements of the plan, and I'm going to start off with the plan's origin. Where did it come from? Then I'm going to talk about some of the thought process behind the things that we've done. The plan is based on, it's really based on guidance from our health agencies, from the governor's office and their planning here in the state of Texas, the Department of State Health Services, and the United States CDC, our health organization. We looked at the CDC's interim guidance for business and employers as they plan to respond to the coronavirus, the COVID-19. The plan is based on our state health department, DSH's, their guidance for COVID-19, their recommendations for best practices for Texas businesses. It's also based on the governor's report to Open Texas and its phased approach to planning and that while maintaining safety, but also strategically opening up Texas. And then last but not least, probably most importantly, it's based on our Division of State Health Services, DSH's, their minimum standard health protocols for COVID-19. This is something that is actually required that all the state agencies and businesses do when opening their businesses or agencies back up in the state. Planning elements for the document, really three main planning elements that were very important to producing a good document. That was employee safety, preventing, reducing spread, transmission of the virus among employees. Number two, maintaining a healthy office workspace, operations, conducting field activities. And three, maintaining a healthy office work environment for the staff. Who all was involved? As I'd mentioned in the creation of the document, we initially engaged our TCEQ pandemic response team. As Toby had mentioned earlier, we formed that team early on. That team extended out to agency leadership and managers and directors, deputies, executive office, and commissioner's office to provide input and to help in refining the planning elements and procedures in the document. We also held a planning Q&A conference call, a little maybe not pre-Teams, but hadn't fully moved into the Teams environment yet. But so we held a conference call to discuss the planning elements of the document. I can tell you right now that one call really opened my eyes to how much effort, how much passion and thought everyone put into their review of the document. It was really a large effort, and a lot of good material and information came out of that one call and into the document. I'd like to talk about the document highlights. I don't want to go through the whole document, but I do want to touch on some of the elements of the document, and I can also go back and talk about any area if you would like. The document, what was most important is we used the phased approach to return. This promoted social distancing. It allowed us to keep staff, employees who were teleworking efficiently at home. Like Toby had mentioned, the governor's office and their guidance was, that's the safest place. Folks that can work from home should continue to work from home. And I think that's key around this whole plan. Second is we put a limit on staff returning to the office of 25%. That's a limit and a cap. It's not a goal. And in a lot of areas, we'll be able to bring staff back to fulfill those regulatory challenges that they need to work on for much less than that 25%. Overall, we probably won't see a whole lot of change to what the agency looks like right now, while bringing back some folks to help us fill those challenges. And on that note right there, the priority for determining what staff would come back under this plan is really focused on the necessity to carry out our essential functions and services. And that includes bringing back those staff that can help us fill those regulatory challenges where our services were discontinued or maybe our productivity was materially diminished. And then it also is based on the idea and the phased approach that's captured in the governor's Open Texas Plan. Another element of the plan, and this is one that's required, and this is under those DSH's minimum health standard protocols, probably one of the most important parts. Stay home if you're sick. Sick employees need to stay home, and that includes employees that would exhibit a characteristic or symptoms of COVID-19. Let's say they've tested positive, or they, have someone in their household who's tested positive, or they're caring for someone that's tested positive, or they otherwise suspect that they've had an exposure. And this is to protect those employees that do come into the office. And as far as, the employees that do test positive, we've outlined that those employees should follow the DSH's and CDC guidance on when it's safe for them to return to the office, or they've got a provider release for return to work. Not that's required, but as long as they follow the guidelines on the timelines on when they can return to work, that's what we have in the plan. Another important element is keeping the office closed to the public. So while the office is closed, that doesn't mean we're not assisting the public. We will continue to assist the public through the established virtual methods that we've been using, emails and telephone and virtual meetings. And then we're going to reevaluate that as soon as possible and hope to see what a public access would look like if there was something available, maybe June 30th, to have that, end of June, to have that reevaluated. And this is also to provide for employee safety. Another key element for the plan is to have a safety training required for all the employees coming back into the office, and even those employees that had stayed in the office, our essential staff, have them take the training as well. And this is training that will be available through our Learning Center. And there goes my computer. I'm going to log back on here real fast. That's my reminder to continue to move my mouse. And, we'll try that again. Here we go. Sorry about this. All right, we're back on. I won't let that happen again. Okay, so complete safety training. This is really important. This is a key part of the plan. It helps us equip our employees so that they understand how they can help with reducing the spread of the virus. So key elements of our training are to make sure staff understand how the virus spreads, make sure they understand the symptoms, and good hygiene practices to keep everyone safe, make sure they understand our respiratory etiquette, social distancing, what that means, and then also cleaning and disinfecting commonly used surfaces, washing your hands, and so on. Read the plan, another important element. We've posted the plan out on our COVID-19 Shared Internet site, and it's very important that the staff, all the staff, take a look at the plan and understand what's in the plan and ask questions. So that's very important. And on that part, we've established an HR policy mailbox that's available for all staff to send any questions, comments, or concerns, regarding the plan or any other aspects to our response to COVID-19. This is a required element, and this comes from the minimum health standards protocols from DSHS. Daily screenings before you come into the office. This is a self-screening that we've chosen to go with. Our thought process behind this is that it was probably it's more convenient, and I think it's more protective of everyone's privacy and their health information to allow our employees to conduct their health screening at home. We have an email that goes out every morning that gives staff a reminder that they're required to do that self-screening before they come into the office or they travel on official state business. Go through the list of symptoms. Do you have any of those symptoms? Go through a list of questions. If you answered no to everything, you're fine. You've checked your temperature and you're good to go. We ask that staff then forward that email with the response to their supervisor to let them know that they've taken the screen, they screened themselves, they've answered no, and they're heading into the office. There's a few questions where maybe they do have symptoms or they've answered yes. We ask that they stay home and contact their supervisor. With some of the answers where you answered yes, like say, have you traveled out of state recently? If it was to a neighboring state and there's no concerns currently known, your supervisor can quickly tell you that, and you will be then allowed to go ahead and come into the office or travel on state business. Another question, and this is there to promote discussion. If you answered yes, have you been tested for COVID-19? What we're really looking for, have you been tested because you have symptoms or you've been exposed and you feel you may have the virus? If that's why you answered yes, then of course, stay home, follow the guidance as written in the plan. If you answered yes because there was a new testing pod in your neighborhood and you wanted to go get your test, obviously that's not necessarily a concern unless your test comes back positive. Hopefully not. So in that case, you just wanted to be tested, then your supervisor would clear you to come on into the office. And so that's why those questions are there. I think this is important. And so we ask staff to do that every morning before they come into the office. Some staff that say they may not be able to do that from home, then as soon as they get into the office and log into the network, they provide that email to the supervisor and so on. Important, we're asking employees to use their ID, scan their ID when they come into the building and when they leave, so that we can track their time in the building. This is not to track work time. This is to track your presence in the building. We also have asked the managers to have a system in place where they can track who is in the office and when. This is important because our thought behind this is if we have a employee who's in the office, then notify us that they've tested positive or they now have symptoms, we need to be able to tell those employees that were in the office in that area or in that region office of a possible exposure. And we've actually done that. That's the thought process behind that and the reasoning. Another required element, and this is in the health protocols, is wash hands when entering the building. Upon entering, you're asked to go wash your hands in the bathroom with soap and water. If you can't do that, then sanitize your hands using a hand sanitizer. One of the things I do is I keep a bottle on my truck, and each morning before I come in the office, I sanitize my hands. That's one of those required elements that helps us reduce any virus from being entered into our office environment. Wear a cloth face covering. This is a required element as well. We're asking employees to provide their own cloth face covering. I think everyone has one now. A lot of folks have become very creative in the mask covering that they do have. I know our Region 10 Beaumont office, they even had a group that made masks for the whole office. It was really great. We've also been able to distribute some FEMA-provided cloth masks that we received from TDM and make those available to staff if someone forgets a mask. And we also have other masks, surgical masks available for staff or visitors when we open to the public. This is important because it not necessarily protects you. The cloth face mask protects those around you if you cough or sneeze. So we ask that staff wear the masks when they enter or exit the building or when they're in a common area, a shared area. When they're in their office or a closed room like I am right now, I do have my mask with me, and when I leave this area, I'll put my mask on. It's okay to take your mask off, but to do that, you have to be sure that if you do cough or sneeze, you cover that cough or sneeze, and that's an important part of the plan as well. Other elements of the plan to discuss, so important to wash and sanitize your hands often. I won't get into the details there, but I think everybody's heard that. That's part of our training. Spend at least 20 seconds washing your hands thoroughly with soap and water. If you can't do that, use a hand sanitizer. On that note, they say you need to have an alcohol content of at least 60% in your hand sanitizers. And have placed, and will continue to place hand sanitizers in common areas throughout the buildings. We've shipped additional hand sanitizer to the divisions and the region areas for them to distribute, and we have additional supplies ordered at this time. Another really important element is social distancing, and this is required. This is part of those DSHS requirements, and I think that's a part of reducing the spread, worldwide. I know everybody's heard that term, and that is that we, do things like keep 6 feet apart. Don't go spend time in your coworker's office. Things that we would normally do, we need to not do right now. Things like conducting virtual meetings, team meetings, not having in-person meetings when, if at all possible, things like that can help us reduce the spread of the virus. One of the things that we do know that we've been told, current information, is that the best way that the virus spreads is through person-to-person contact, especially when you're closer than 6 feet to another person for maybe 10 minutes or more for an extended period of time. That's the main way it spreads. It can also spread from commonly touched objects, but they think that's not the most common method, although it is possible. Also, within the governor's and DSH's health protocols, limit the occupancy in the break rooms and conference rooms when we do have to go in those areas, and those occupancy limits will be posted on the doorways to those areas. Elevators. If you're going to ride an elevator, make sure everybody's comfortable with being in there with you. We have an occupancy limit of 4 people per elevator, but if someone's uncomfortable, please respect that and allow them to have the elevator to themselves, things like that. Other real important items are frequent cleaning. We're providing cleaning supplies, disinfectant wipes, and we'll have additional spray bottles of material available around the agency for employees to clean and disinfect their own areas, commonly touched surfaces. And then that also includes enhanced cleaning by facilities and building management, which our folks over in HRSS have definitely done. Travel, and I'm almost through with these. Travel is another big item. Right now, we're restricting out-of-state travel unless that's something that's approved through exec. We are telling staff it's okay to travel, and it's even okay to travel overnight, but if you can travel in a single day trip, that's best. Right now, we're limiting the travel to one person per vehicle, and really talking with all of our staff and our region folks, that's really what everybody's comfortable with right now. And so that makes it a little harder for the inspections and limits maybe the number of inspections we can do initially, but that's something we'll continue to evaluate, and when it's safe to change that, we will certainly do so. Communication with employees, probably one of our most important pieces of the plan, which called for creating a repository for documents to provide access for employees to review the information, the plans, links to health and safety information, and OAS has created that COVID page on our internal ShareNet site, which has been very helpful for us to be able to post and share information. A couple of last items as far as agency cafeteria. We're recommending be at this point takeout only, and that could change in the future. We think that's the safest measure at this point. And then for any kind of the gym areas, exercise areas in the agency, at this time, because of the cleaning difficulties in those areas, the showers, the locker rooms, we're recommending that those areas stay closed. Last items in the plan to discuss are the checklists. Really important to have these checklists available, and that is the checklists for the employees to follow when they come into the office, so the employees don't have to have the plan with them every day. Just a reminder of all the things they need to do. In the back of the plan, there's the checklist that summarizes those things that the office-based employees need to do every day. There's a checklist for the staff that'll be out in the field conducting field activities and those things that they need to do every day. There's a vehicle cleaning checklist. Big thanks to Region 12 and our other region folks for helping put that together. So those are some of the key elements of the plan that we put together. As far as implementation of the plan, that was really after the plan was developed and in a state of readiness to be finalized, we held team meetings with management, deputies, and directors to make sure everybody was comfortable with the content in the plan. We had OAS create the training module and test that out. Looks really good, and we've been very successful with that. And then ultimately, we pushed the plan out with an announcement coming directly from Toby with a state email, and we posted the plan up on our ShareNet site as of June 1st. Our thoughts are, by having the plan activated on June 1st, that's going to give us 2 weeks to kind of work out any kinks, iron out any of the details we need to be fully in a reopening, or what our reopening or return to office phase is going to look like by the 15th. That's really the what I had for the discussion on the plan to return to the office. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those or address any other issues. Thank you.
Can't hear you, Chairman.
You scared me. I thought I was on.
Can't teach an old dog a new trick. I continue to commit that error. So I'm unmuted now. Kelly, thank you for that. I don't have any questions for you right now. Commissioner Lindley, any questions or comments?
No, I appreciate that and all the work put into it. So thanks, Kelly, and everyone else.
Commissioner Janeka?
I only had one question, Kelly, and it's more just, I'm curious about getting insights into your thought process, or the planning committee's thought process, and how to make some of these decisions. I appreciate the document. I think it was a really thorough one. It quickly reminded me how often footnotes and secondary and tertiary documents that are often 50 to 100 pages in length are necessary and included in any emergency or planning document like this. One question that popped up in my mind, just digging into some of those other guidance documents, and specifically referencing the CDC and DISH's guidance that were referenced in the plan, it seemed to me to allow for a possibility, strictly speaking, with that gate of return to work. If an employee has a positive diagnosis of COVID-19 or a presumptive positive diagnosis, there seemed to be a little. So the 14 days seems like just a safe length of time, and my assumption was we used that as a easy, consistent, just wait a couple weeks and then reassess. It looks like the guidance, strictly speaking, is 10 days after the onset of initial symptoms and after 3 days or 72 hours of no symptoms. So that math could work out in the squish it down as much as you can. That could be just a 10 to 11 day window when an employee may present and meet some of the guidance gates. Does our plan, and I'm presuming again that most of this will be ironed out in great detail in the guidance that comes out from HRSS to the different division directors, but was there any thought process in simplicity, or have y'all dug into those weeds, and where are you thinking on that point directly?
So originally, the group, we looked at just looking at all the guidance that was out there from the CDC, from DISHs and so on, and tried to put together the best possible guidance on when it would be safe for an employee to return to the office. We pivoted kind of at the last minute when the governor's office released their Open Texas plan and provided the Department of State Health Services minimum standard health protocols. And in that, there is a letter that DISHs sent out to all employers, state agencies, that outline the protocols to follow for returning an employee to the office area. And so at that point, that was when we shifted to follow that procedure, and without putting all that detail into the plan, you're right, that's where we put that down in the footnotes with a reference and a link to that document to be able to have that available for folks to follow. And I think that's, hopefully that does cover at least a 14-day period. They think they're required to be fever-free for 72 hours. And then there's another 10-day quarantine period beyond that. I think the thought process behind that was from the time they became symptomatic, if they were symptomatic, to the time they quarantined, if they had fever, to when they were fever-free, and then spent an additional 10 days out of the office to be able to cover that 14-day window. But definitely something that I think you're absolutely right on. We need to look at that. We need to continue to evaluate that. And if there's better guidance or change, definitely update the plan. One thing that I firmly believe in for all plans, a plan is really something for us to start with. No plan that I've ever had has ever been executed exactly as written. But without a plan, you can't revise it, and you can't make updates, and you can't make it better. And so I think that's part of the process and something we have to commit to continually reviewing and updating the plan to keep it relevant and current. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I just have one quick comment based on this conversation about, latency of the virus and, acknowledging that there can be, or we think there can be, transmission from people who are asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic. There's this concept, not just for people who we know to be affected, but for healthy employees as another mitigation technique that can be layered on top is how you schedule people in the office. And so I know it's in the plan, but if it works for your particular team, for a particular manager or supervisor, you can schedule an employee to work 4 10s and then have 10 days off and work another 4 10s. And that drives down the risk of transmitting the virus. It gives employees an opportunity to experience symptoms and take appropriate actions or to get through periods of high contagion. Just another thought about what managers can do to build mitigation on top of mitigation to best protect our employees.
Chairman, I want to give you credit for that. And when I said that the creation of the plan was truly an agency collaboration, you provided that information on that link for the research that was conducted abroad that talked about working, the 4 days in office and then 10 days out, where that could be telework or whatever, and providing how that was a very safe way to return folks to the office. So I appreciate you identifying that. We even captured that and put the link to that research material in the document. I think that's probably one of the best, safest approaches I've seen. And just to show you how hands-on the leadership of this agency really is, I think everybody had a hand in putting the document together, so thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Colleagues, any more questions or comments at this point? All right, let's continue on.
Good morning. Kate, Kelly Cook, really appreciate your partnership on all this. Just want to mention that on the onset. It's been great working with you, and I know my colleagues in OAS feel the same way. So appreciate y'all.
Couldn't have done it without you. Thank you.
Likewise. For the record, my name's Kelly Keel-Linden. I'm the Deputy for the Office of Administrative Services. I have a few comments that I want to make and a few things I want to touch on that should complement Kelly Cook's comments. I'm going to talk a little bit about training, safety protocols, and building occupancy. So following the recommendations from the Department of State Health Services in connection with the Reopening Texas Plan, we developed the COVID-19 safety training course to ensure that all employees are aware of, like we've talked about, how the virus spreads, the fundamentals of preventing the spread. That includes hand hygiene, respiratory etiquette, social distancing, and basic cleaning and disinfection. So since Kelly mentioned the training, since we put the training out June 1st, 86% of our employees have already completed that training, and contractors who are going to be in the office are also going to be required to complete that training. So looking at our safety protocols, again, safety is a daily habit for the agency and particularly people that are coming into the office. So before reporting to work, employees have to do the daily self-check for symptoms and certify with their supervisor that they've completed that check. Again, this is that 6 a.m. email that everybody gets. It goes to all employees. So we've created a safety checklist to remind employees about the safety protocols that Kelly mentioned in the plan. That is social distancing, washing their hands frequently, wearing a face covering when in common areas, and maintaining a clean workspace. So we have safety reminders around the agency, including in the regional offices. But most importantly, employees who are sick or maybe taking care of someone who is sick are required to stay home. The employees are monitored and must be medically cleared before they can return to work in the office or conduct field work on behalf of the agency. Regarding building occupancy, since March, with our skeleton crews needed for essential services, those folks have been reporting to the office. So for Park 35, about 70% of the agency's workforce is at Park 35. So that's roughly 1,800 employees. The first few weeks of COVID, about 50 to 60 employees were on campus. That was largely in Building A. Beginning June 1st, we've seen about another 40 to 50 staff at Park 35 campus. So our average among the 6 buildings at Park 35 is about 100 to 120 people any given day. So, you know, we're assuming that we're going to see more folks moving to June 15th, but we should be well below that 25% cap that Kelly mentioned. Again, not a goal, a cap. So 25% of 1,800 is about 450 people. So we'll be well below that. To help us monitor the number of staff in the offices and to provide that potential risk exposure or any other safety concerns, we are piloting and expanding a web-based in-out board. It's a signing in and out tool that will allow us to know who's in the office during different periods of time. And we're also looking at contact-free ways to receive visitors into the agency and electronic visitor logs to record their contact information, as well as any dates or times that folks were in the office. So with that, I can answer any questions that y'all may have.
I have none. Colleagues, any questions?
No, thank
No questions other than just to commend y'all across the board in terms of the all the efforts to date, but also I think I've been pleased with how the planning efforts and the direction from the agency has tried to keep a degree of flexibility inherent to it, which I've been really pleased to see. I like the idea that the division directors ultimately will be driving this this posture, and that will give us a much higher degree of making sure that across all of our very wildly different programs in the agency, it will let us have the right fit for the right approach. And I very much hope to see a continued dialogue so that if there are successes individually and this novel 10-4 approach, that I was really interested to see it. I wasn't aware of it before reading that plan, and I was reviewing it again last night. It was the first time I'd taken the time to dig into that plan. So thank you, Chairman, for catching and sharing that along, because I think it's a good example of how much we all need to try to rethink our existing paradigms. And if any division directors or individual managers come up with something really novel, I hope the full agency will benefit from that quickly. But just really, really pleased to date that y'all are neither taking an overly conservative, nope, everyone must do this. You're leaving room for flexibility to help find more found efficiencies. So I'm pretty happy with it across the board.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think the commissioners are good for now, so let's continue on.
Great. I think at this point we're going to move into maybe highlighting some of the successes that we've been able to experience and through this. And my fault, I didn't speak with L'Oreal or Romero about who wanted to go first, and I can't see them because they're in another room. So either one of you guys, feel free to jump in here. I'm going to mute my microphone, and I'll let one of y'all take over.
We're playing rock, paper, scissors right now.
No, can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
Hi. Romero and I, we drew straws earlier, so I'll start. This is L'Oreal Stepney. I'm Co-Deputy Executive Director for the agency and Acting Deputy for the Office of Water. So good morning, Commissioners, Chairman. We are happy to talk about some of the agency's successes, and we asked each of the deputies to identify the successes that they've had in responding to the pandemic and also teleworking. And trust me, we got pages and pages of information. So I think what we'll do today is just go over maybe 3 or 4 for each office, and Romero and I are going to split those up. So I'll start with the Office of Water. I think this is true for all of the permitting programs. What we heard from Air, Water, and Waste is that they have been able to maintain the processing of their workloads for their permits. And so we think that in itself is a success as we quickly migrated to teleworking. Also with the Office of Water, just to give you a few statistics, the Water Supply Division was able to issue 51 district bond applications. The Water Quality Division was able to issue 150 individual wastewater permits. And the Water Availability Division was able to complete 11,635 water master field inspections. And this represents about a 22% increase over the previous quarters that we've been tracking since the beginning of the fiscal year. That's something that I think across the board we'll do a deep dive into, learning about the increase, learning what factors changed. Anecdotally, what we've noticed is that the use of iPads and iPhones has certainly made some of our programs more efficient, so we will be ordering more of those. And also, we think with the Water Master Program, it's just great that our staff can be out there on the ground in the field, especially in those areas where they're more drought prone. And certainly water availability and the scarcity of water is really important to the state. So we're real proud of our staff for, again, being on the ground managing the Water Master programs. We were able to also quickly, once we began teleworking, to start accepting some electronic applications versus paper. We worked with Kelly Killenden's shop and were able to use an agency FTP site, which really made teleworking more efficient for those applicants who wanted to take advantage of that. Another big project in the Water Quality Division was we were able to continue to move forward expeditiously on the oil and gas delegation package. We've had several very extensive conference calls with our federal partners, EPA, and also state partners, and we've been able to keep that project moving well ahead of schedule. And then finally, for the Office of Water, I think a very important part of what we do is we protect public drinking water. And certainly it's a critical, essential function for the agency and for the nation to protect our water supplies. I'm proud to say that the Water Supply Division continued to process 162,000 public water analytical data results every month for compliance purposes. They were also able to develop technical assistance and guidance and laboratory information for public drinking water facilities. They were able to locate chemical supplies and work directly with the TexWarn program to establish a pool of operators that could assist just in case one of the public water systems operators unfortunately fell ill to COVID or was working with a family member who was ill from COVID. All of these tools were put up on the agency's COVID guidance page and were accessible to the public and the public water systems. And we're really excited that we were able to provide that assistance. Now moving on to the Office of Waste. As I mentioned, they were able to maintain their permitting load and continue to process permits efficiently in a teleworking environment. A couple of things to highlight for the Office of Waste. First, the Permitting, Registration, and Support Division, they were able to work with training providers to transition from in-person classroom formats to online remote learning classrooms, which is really a big deal. So occupational licensees were able to get their classroom hours and were able to access that information online. And as you're aware, many of the occupational licenses that the Office of Waste issues go to water and wastewater facilities as well as others. And so we think that was a really important and critical step in maintaining continuity for the program. As of June 1st, 23 training providers have been approved with 105 classroom courses, 16 workshops, and 2 conferences that will be held online. The Office of Waste was also able to work with the Chief Clerk's Office, who's been fabulous in helping us set up virtual meetings and also helping us with just day-to-day processing of different applications. The agency held its first virtual public meeting for MSW registration for a medical waste facility in Amarillo. And the public was able to ask questions of the applicant and of the agency staff. And so we think that was a real success. And all of the verbal comments are recorded and made on the record. And folks were able to do that from the safety of their homes. Now moving on to the Office of Legal Services. As you can imagine, during the pandemic process, we all had to rely quite a bit on the Office of Legal Services to answer a lot of the statutory and regulatory questions that we had. They were able to work within those regulatory frameworks to find processes that will allow permit applications to be processed and move forward expeditiously, including coming up with novel ideas to handle issues such as when public places were closed, such as libraries, and how permit applications would be available to the public. They worked with our IT staff to create a website that allowed permit-related documents to be made available for viewing and copying those links directly from the site. And so we really appreciate all of those efforts. To date, the last time I looked this morning, and I think there were about 219 applications and entries that were on that website. And so we believe that that's been really, really helpful, especially to the permitting process. Our General Law Division has moved forward with securing restored grant funding and requesting additional funding. All of these will benefit the Texas economy. And so we're really excited that they were able to continue to do that remotely. And then finally, for the Office of Legal Services, the Litigation Division issued an emergency order appointing a temporary manager for an abandoned public water system, going back to that public health and safety for drinking water. And that ensured that Texans had continuous and adequate supply of drinking water for those particular citizens of the state. And then just one more for some of the divisions that report to the executive office, just real quickly, for our Toxicology, Risk Assessment, and Research Division. On May 15th, the division completed an assessment of the cancer potential of ethylene oxide. And this is a very important chemical because it's used to sterilize half of the medical devices that are used in the nation. And the division found that ethylene oxide is much safer than had previously been thought. And this important finding was very important, especially since the sterilizing facilities had to reopen to respond to the pandemic. And so the division is always focused on producing sound science. And so this was a perfect example. Even during the pandemic, the work continued. Dr. Honeycutt, which is the director for the Toxicology Division, also serves as the chair of EPA's Science Advisory Board. And he recently chaired a COVID research panel, which released a report on June 4th and is focused on EPA's research plan for addressing SARS-CoV-2 virus. And then finally, our External Relations Division. They have been just instrumental in the pandemic, in us responding to the pandemic. They've been instrumental in the agency's communication and outreach to the public and the citizens and the applicants. One promotion that they did that just saw a tremendous amount of success was the Take Care of Texas promotion, where they paid for a promotion through social media, and they received 10,000 new teacup pledges, and the winner was able to receive a Yeti cooler. But the most impressive thing was they were able to grow their numbers from 40,000 participants to 50,000, so a 25% increase. So as always, again, we are always really appreciative of our communication staff and our External Relations Division, and certainly the Take Care of Texas program. So with that, I guess I can wait to answer any questions, but I know Romero is teed up to do the remaining offices in the agency. Thank you.
Here we go. Thank you, L'Oreal. I appreciate the presentation and all the great work that's represented by that. I don't have any questions for you. Commissioner Lindley, any questions? I heard a no, but I think you just committed my favorite sin by.
Sorry, yes, no questions. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Ginecca.
Appreciate the updates. No questions here.
Thank you. So I think we're ready for Ramiro. Thank you, L'Oreal.
Very good. Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners, General Counsel. This is Ramiro Garcia. I'm the Co-Deputy Executive Director and the Acting Deputy Director of the Office of Compliance and Enforcement. I have the privilege today to give you some quick sound bites or some quick successes, related to the Office of AIR, Office of Administrative Services, and the Office of Compliance and Enforcement. We'll start with the Office of AIR. The AIR Grants Division transitioned the management of the TERP and the Texas Volkswagen Environmental Grants Program to a fully electronic platform. They established an electronic process for the execution and encumbrance of grant contracts, began providing all grant documents to grantees by email instead of hard copy, and established a process in Microsoft Teams for the electronic receipt, review, and approval of grant applications, grantee payment requests, equipment disposition verifications, and grantee annual usage reports. The Air Permits Division has issued approximately 1,073 permits since the beginning of telework to allow companies to either continue operating or expand their operations. This included permits by rule to allow a company to begin manufacturing isopropyl alcohol or rubbing alcohol for sanitizing and disinfection to assist with the shortage due to COVID-19. One thing that this agency has embarked on is the use and the adoption of lean management. And the Air Quality Division moved their lean management project for emissions banking and trading to the telework environment and was able to continue the project using an electronic version of the flow board, the process board, and proxy cards. The team continues to meet at regularly scheduled time via Microsoft Teams to allow the team to interact during huddles. They currently have over 90 reports in process and have completed 18. So I think today the general theme is the use of the technology we have at our fingertips and Microsoft Teams. And I must tell you, as a deputy, it's really came in handy. And I'll tell you, I'm not the most technically savvy person, so how seamlessly it worked to be able to use Teams for me, I never had any issues, which speaks volumes to the work of Office of Administrative Services, which I'll cover next. The first thing that really, and a lot of feedback I got from my folks in OCE, but talking to my colleagues, is just how quick Information Resources Division was to support the agency as we moved into a COVID telework posture. There were a lot of concerns and nationwide, about the bandwidth of the networks, having equipment, how would it work at home? And everybody I talked to that would call IRD, Information Resources, just raved about how quickly they responded and helped them solve these problems. Office of Administrative Services also redirected a purchase of laptops for FY20, and that helped them deploy a lot of laptops out to our staff that helped us remain productive during this time. They doubled the internet bandwidth capacity to support more than 1,700 concurrent VPN users. They enable agency customer phone lines to be managed remotely. They purchased cell phones, as Toby mentioned earlier, which also helped our folks keep in contact with regulated entities to keep the work going. And they also purchased 50 air cards to help folks that maybe didn't have internet access at home. The other thing that was a big project that was going on before this for the Office of Administrative Services is preparing for the CAPS deployment, or the Centralized Payroll Personnel System, which is July 13th. OAS worked with folks out in the different divisions, and they continued testing, validated employment information, developed IT systems and processes. They completed every task by the comptroller's deadlines, and the work they did, you helped them pioneer the CAPS HR payroll conversion telework process for future agencies. So really proud of the work that OAS has done there in preparing us for that transition to CAPS, which is an important step for this agency. So the next thing I'll cover is Office of Compliance and Enforcement. I must tell you, as I raved earlier about the use of technology, the one thing that has been a challenge as a deputy for OCE is we're a pretty big group of folks, about 1,028, give or take. So it's not as easy to get us all in one room to have a chat, and talk and catch up. the use of Microsoft Teams really helped bridge that gap. And it was an idea that Christy Mills-Jurok, who is our Division Director for Program Support and Environmental Assistance Division, came to me and said, hey, why don't we have town hall meetings with, let's say, each area and then each division. And I being the technology challenge guy, I was like, oh, are you sure? And I got to tell you, I'm so happy we did that. The use of Teams really helped me reach out and touch folks, in the regions or talk to folks that I hadn't been able to talk to. And seeing some of those faces there in the camera really energized me and helped me get through this too, because as we all know, this pandemic has isolated us. And so having that really boosted my spirits. But the one thing I didn't expect were the nice notes afterwards, that people just took a moment to send me an email saying, hey, really appreciate that. It meant a lot to me. And to hear all the things the agency's been doing, as you've heard about today. So really can't say enough about, thanking OAS for keeping the behind-the-scenes stuff working. Now, the regions, what they did is, and it's our challenge, is they continued their field presence to conduct on-site investigations for priority complaints and emergency response while maintaining a secure distance, keeping our staff safe and keeping the regulated entities and our fellow citizens safe. Through the end of May, we looked at the numbers, and we had about a 10% decrease in the amount of investigations. The other thing that we did see is flip-flop for us is we had more what we call in-house investigations, desktop reviews versus boots on the ground. Now, we were able to get some also boots on the ground investigations via different methodologies, which is getting a lot of documentation ahead of time and using virtual type of technology wherein we asked the operator to go take a picture of a spill bucket. What is important is it has to be a timestamp, things that we can defend. We've had to use some video to do that. So we're still working through that, but we've been able to get some good information that's helped us do some of these investigations. The key thing, as we keep our folks safe, is also keeping our fellow citizens safe. So that's where we've worked with the regulated community to make sure and get our job done, but also keep folks safe has been that balancing act. Now, the monitoring division, they kept the stationary ambient air monitoring network operating without any big issues and at full capacity. They also deployed 2 new stationary monitors, one on Red Hill Lane in Southern Bexar County near Matthew Middle School, which is a PM 2.5. They also deployed another PM 2.5 monitor in Von Ormy, which is in Atascosa County. So it's really neat to see that during this, they were able to get this and that those monitors are online and reporting data. Now, you heard a little bit about, critical infrastructure, not only, thanking Kelly for his tireless work at the agency level on the response team, but also how his division kept things moving forward. Can't thank Michelle Havelka enough for being that contact at the SOC and helping solve, issues through the SOC as things came up and keeping that work going. But the big part is hurricane season started. And so before all that, we started preparing, talking to our partners over at NDOW and talk about, hey, we're in a pandemic. What if a storm comes up? How are we going to respond? So they worked on developing ways to help us respond by updating the addendum to the health and safety plan for the 2020 hurricane season, which puts us in a position where we can respond and we can do it safely, given that we're still in a pandemic. So it's little things, as we watched Cristobal form and then head north, when we were ready. We had done the work during the pandemic to be ready before and during the pandemic to be ready. So that was a good, really something I was very proud of. And the enforcement division, last example, they mailed 216 administrative orders. They closed 109 enforcement cases, and they settled or referred 151 cases, either referred to litigation or settled them, 151, excuse me. So a lot of things, as L'Oreal pointed out, a lot of different bullets that we can talk about, but those are just some highlights of things that really proud of our staff. And really, I love working with folks like this that think of, in an adverse type situation like this, come up with good ideas to help us continue to be productive, and just the flexibility and the positive nature of folks in this agency. And this makes me really proud to be here. So with that, I thank you for your time and available for any questions.
Thank you, Ramiro. Appreciate that. Why don't we go in reverse order again? And Commissioner Ginecca, do you have any questions or comments?
Chairman, let me jump in real quick.
Sure.
And just remind you guys that all of the deputies are here. So if you want to dive in a little bit more, feel free. So they are, you won't be able to see them, but you'll be able to hear them. So anyway, just a reminder. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's all right. Thank you for that. Commissioner Ginecca?
I appreciate it. I don't think I have any particular questions. I really think it was a helpful update from both Ramiro and L'Oreal.
Commissioner Lindley.
I really don't have any questions, kind of sort of one quick comment. And, those were just a glimpse of the successes we've had. And so I just want to recognize that. One area that I was very interested in at the beginning, I remember reading, I think it was in I don't know if it was a daily report or one of the reports that went out putting together maybe the document on areas that we were having, areas that we had to switch our focus during the pandemic and figure out how to keep moving forward on. And that was in the Office of Waste, the permits, registration, the people that, issue the licenses and that PRS, that division. And I remember thinking at the time, this has been over a month ago, gosh, I don't want us to have a delay there. People get their license or their registrations, because those are people that are wastewater permit operators or other occupations that affect human health. And I asked about it one day, and I think within 2 or 3 days later, obviously my asking is not what spurred anything or improved on anything, but I was asking at the same time. They were already on it. They already had a solution. And by the next time I heard anything, which was, again, 2 or 3 days later, so they'd already done all the work, was what they ended up accomplishing, which L'Oreal discussed. I was just really impressed with that. So I just wanted to give, and I know it wasn't just PRS that accomplished a lot, but I was really impressed with what they were able to get done. And I know that took more than one division to get that done. They had to have help of probably a lot of folks in OAS and other divisions as well. So I was just really impressed with that work and the TERP stuff. I thought that was pretty darn impressive. And then lastly, now is not the time or place to talk about it, and I don't even think we can because of how things are captioned today. So I'll just very broadly say that I am interested in the topic of enforcement discretion and what that looks like moving forward. And we can talk about that at a different time and place when appropriate, but I think we've done a good job. I am interested in what our plan is moving forward, and I'll just leave it at that. We can discuss later.
Commissioner Lindley, thank you. A lot of great comments regarding enforcement discretion. I would refer folks to our COVID, the public, to our COVID response website. We have quite a bit of information about how we've employed that particular policy or authority in this event. Thanking our employees for having already solved problems as we discover them. I mean, that's one of the things I love about this agency, which makes our jobs so much easier, is the customer service attitude, the urgency attitude that has all of our staff leaning into problems and solving them as they come up, and not waiting to be told to do things. And it's something I just really value about the culture of this agency. I wanted to underscore a few other points. And L'Oreal, thank you for mentioning the drinking water system. I don't know if there's anything that this agency does that has a more direct and immediate impact on public health and making sure that our drinking water supplies are safe. And it is still amazing to me that we're able to look at 162,000 analytical results every month as part of the effort to ensure that. Also making sure that the operators are there with the proper authorization, the proper training in order to do that work, making sure that the chemical supply is there, because we actually can't have safe drinking water without certain chemical feedstocks into that. And that will transition me over to some of Ramiro's remarks. And the regulated entities that we support with environmental regulatory services are out there supporting public health and safety every day, as is the case with wastewater treatment plants and drinking water plants, but also by providing chemical feedstocks that promote that. In the COVID pandemic, providing raw materials for hand sanitizer, ethyl alcohol, et cetera, providing feedstock for manufacturing personal protective equipment, for medical equipment. L'Oreal mentioned sterilizing. So we're part of an ecosystem that is helping do good things for the for the public health in Texas and the economy. On the economy, I just want to give a shout out to our folks in the Air Grants program for moving that process to an entirely electronic platform. We distribute tens of millions of dollars, over $1 billion over the course of the history of these programs for projects that replace, largely it's dirty diesel combustion units with cleaner technologies, whatever the technology may be. So not only does it have a great benefit to the environment, but it's also especially important right now in this pandemic period. We're continuing to pump tens of millions of dollars into the Texas economy. So anyway, great work. I appreciate it. That's all the comments that I have at this point. Toby, anything else on this item 1?
No, Chairman. Nothing else on this.
I think I'll propose that we take another short recess, and then we'll call the second item for the work session. How much time do y'all want? 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
It doesn't matter.
5? Okay. I've got 10:46, let's call it. So why don't we try to be back at, 11:46. Why don't we try to be back at 11:50 or shortly thereafter, and we'll continue. And with that, we are in recess. All right. Can you hear me?
Can.
Good. All right. Well, we are back in session after a short recess. Time's 11:51. I think we've concluded with item 1 on our agenda. And Ms. Smith, I think I'll ask you to go ahead and read the caption for item 2 and tee us off.
Item number 2 is the discussion of agency preparations for potential future disaster response activities.
Thank you. And many weeks ago, when it finally occurred to me that we would simultaneously be in a pandemic and hurricane season, I thought, oh my God, Kelly, what are we going to do? And Kelly told me that they had already been well underway with planning efforts with our multiple agency partners on this. So Kelly, this one is yours. I'm going to give my colleagues a moment to offer any comments or questions, then we'll give you the floor. Commissioner Lindley?
Thanks. This is a very important topic, and I wish I could see you. Something happened when I left my work laptop here. I don't know if y'all can see me. I can't see y'all.
We can see you.
Okay, well, I have a screen that, it logged me out, so I tried to log back in, and now I'm told the security database on the server doesn't have a computer account for this workstation trust relationship. So assurances, our IT department is doing their work and keeping our databases safe. So I apologize that, well, actually, it doesn't matter. I guess y'all can still see me. I can't see y'all, but I'll be listening and paying attention and appreciate all the work that's gone on this topic, too, because it's pretty significant and just kind of terrifying to think about another horrible hurricane hitting while a pandemic is going on. But I know that we will be prepared because we have the best staff in the country, in our state, that can get us to a place where we need to be, where we'll be able to manage any kind of situation or storm that comes our way. So with that, I will pass the baton.
Thank you, Commissioner Lindley. Commissioner Ginecka?
Yeah, no particular questions or positions or statements now, other than just I remain eager to hear anywhere that we can take any actions from our part, and that might just be simply where you've recognized the problem ahead on the road, where the agency doesn't currently have any tools, and it may fall to those of us at the agency leadership level to make the ask elsewhere. So I'm very eager to know how I can help with getting in the way at the very least. So eager to hear. Thanks.
Thanks, Commissioner. Kelly, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. Again, my name is Kelly Cook, Director for the TCEQ's Critical Infrastructure Division. So this year in our preparedness activities for hurricane season, we normally start the process in February, March, April. So this year, I believe it was late March, early April, we participated in our annual phone call with our NDAL partners. That's our Natural Disaster Operational Work Group, something that was formed out of Hurricane Ike for agencies that have a lot of like duties, both state and federal partners. So our NDAL group, we had our yearly hurricane season call, EPA, Texas Coast Guard, Texas General Land Office, U.S. Coast Guard, Texas Railroad Commission, EPA, FEMA, and so on. And the main topic that came up, the very first topic was COVID-19 and responder safety. It was decided early on in that meeting that we would form a committee to look at how we would be able to respond to a hurricane, put responders in the field during pandemic conditions, assuming that we would still be under the COVID-19 virus pandemic. So this group worked tirelessly. They had the weekly Teams meetings and prepared an addendum to the NDAL health and safety plan. And so as has been mentioned earlier in the discussion today, they basically had created a COVID-19 health and safety plan addendum for the group's safety plan, and that was completed on May 19th. In addition to that, in that addendum, to help provide more safety during the pandemic, there's provisions for providing medical teams with our responders. And so what we'd like to have is a medical team located each of our command post areas where we normally stage with other partner agencies. In addition, we decided that would be really good to have larger response areas. If you've been out to one of our command posts or branch locations during Hurricane Harvey or other disasters, they can get quite crowded. And so one of the things that was done is to go out and find larger areas where we can stage personnel, but also try to maintain that social distancing space as much as possible. And with EPA's help, they've gone out and secured larger staging areas. I think that's going to be very important. Another part of this meeting is where we talk with EPA and the U.S. Coast Guard, where TCEQ and the General Land Office confirm the types of assets that we will requesting if there is a large storm, on the Texas coast. We also confirm that usually if it's a Category 1 or 2 hurricane or tropical storm, we're probably not going to request federal assistance or a mission assignment, although we could request assets. A Cat 3 or higher in a hurricane, we're probably going to be requesting a federal assistance, and that would be through a mission assignment with FEMA for the services of Coast Guard and EPA, along with military forces, usually the National Guard or civil support teams that have the hazmat capabilities. The assets that we confirmed that we would likely request if we had a large storm this year were EPA's TAGA bus that can move through neighborhoods while taking air samples at the same time, and their Aspect aircraft that we could deploy out to conduct air sampling from above. Both those assets were used for Hurricane Harvey and have probably been used on most of the major emergency response hazmat incidents in the state recently. There's also, just to stop there for a second, one of the ideas that Toby had asked me to look into is maybe making a request to EPA for the possible reassignment of the TAGA bus to Texas or Louisiana to get it closer to the coast. Currently, the Region 6 TAGA bus is based out of Las Vegas, Nevada, which takes about a 2-day deployment time. And so I've talked with some folks at EPA who really do support this idea. Don't know that it's something that's feasible, but we're going to work on that request for the future to see if that's something that would be a possibility. One of the other things that we solidified during our seasonal call was that the group would be using a water facility assessment phone bank, something that we've done in the past, where we can make calls out to facilities to check operational status. We would also be using our software platform. It's a shared database platform with all of our agencies. Response Manager is the name of the program. You've probably heard that. So we'll be committed to using that as well, which will be a great asset to everyone involved. And then one of the things that had come out of an EPA audit from Hurricane Harvey was maybe increasing the use of community liaison staff in the field to help get information out to the folks in the neighborhoods. This is actually something that believe we did a really good job with during Hurricane Harvey, and that's something that we committed to continue on with for the next disaster. And that would be something that would be provided through a mission assignment from EPA to provide those staff to help with that duty. Coordination with Texas Military Forces, always a great partner and a great asset for disaster response. TCEQ's Emergency Management Coordinator, Anthony Buck, met with Texas Military Forces liaison earlier this year and made that request to follow up on the COVID-19 HASP addendum, made the request for a mission assignment from Texas Military Forces for medical teams. And so we've asked for up to 3 to 4 medical teams to be able to disperse those teams amongst our branch locations to help with monitoring staff during the response. We have a very favorable commitment from Texas Military Forces, and more than likely that would be fulfilled with our mission assignment. We've also coordinated with the Texas 6 Civil Support Team, which have extensive hazardous material capabilities to be able to respond with us during a storm or disaster. And last but not least, we've coordinated with the Texas State Guard engineering group to be able to provide a force mission package of engineers and retired water and wastewater system operators to help us with our facility assessments of those infrastructure facilities in the aftermath of the storm. So very great assets to have on board, and definitely we're glad we have those folks in the batter's box if needed. Some of the other, just real quick, things we've been working on, accomplishments, is we've been able to hold our response manager training classes, something we do every year. We've been able to hold those classes remotely during the pandemic instead of having to send staff out to region offices and set that up. We have been able to provide those online, which was very helpful. And then also credit to our great regional staff and our regional offices who make up our and staff our disaster response strike teams. We have 16 of those teams. We have one in each of our region offices. They're all trained in disaster response, and our facility assessment techniques, and they're basically considered interchangeable, where we can bring a staff in from other parts of the state to help out along the coast during a disaster. And likewise, when we have emergency response events in other parts of the states, we can move those teams around as needed to make sure we always have available, fresh, rested staff ready to respond out during any disaster. That's a part of our readiness for this season. We usually have a hurricane exercise that involves all the agencies and a lot of TCEQ staff. We hold that every year, usually in April. We were forced to cancel that this year due to the pandemic. However, I feel with the agency's experience with responding to recent emergency disasters, both in the Houston, Deer Park area and then in the Beaumont region area, fairly large events. We have a lot of staff that are very experienced in taking care of these duties in the field, and I feel we have a very high state of readiness for any response if we're called on to respond to a hurricane. That's what I have, sir. Back to you.
Thank you, Kelly. I want to ask you if you would to, for folks who haven't been through a disaster event like this and who may not be real familiar with how the agency approaches it, just provide some context in terms of what TCEQ's role is in a natural disaster, how we work with our NDOW partners to fulfill that role, and how all that operates in the context of the larger state command that has a much broader It's much broader in scope. So kind of the org chart of it, if you will. And then second part is operationally, how is it organized in terms of knowing which agency brings which assets? And you talked about mission assignments. I think it'd be helpful if you could just talk real briefly about how the response works in terms of the organization for making requests for additional assistance and that process piece of it. So kind of the organization org chart part of it, and then the process part of it. Not in any great depth, just sort of high level, so that people can put your comments into context.
Sure, I'd be happy to, sir. So for hurricane response, generally our responsibilities fall under our oil and hazardous materials response capabilities. TCEQ is a primary agency responsible for those duties, or if not directly responsible for that jurisdiction, making sure that the agency that is responsible is responding appropriately. We also have responsibilities in critical infrastructure, making sure that our drinking water facilities are assessed, and if they're impacted, they're being assisted and returned to safe drinking water conditions, as well as our wastewater facilities, the same duties and concerns there. Dam safety, we have a dam safety program, dam safety engineers who conduct outreach to dams in the storm's path to make sure that there are no concerns, and if there are, that we're there to help provide guidance and direction on fixing those issues. Debris management is one of the other larger areas that we deal with, huge. If you take a Hurricane Harvey and all the debris that came with that storm, the agency's responsibility there involves approving temporary debris management sites. You can't leave all the debris at the curbside until it's all completely disposed of. There's just not enough logistics in place to do that all at one time. So you have to collect that material, take it to a temporary debris management site, separate it so that you segregate out the items that they're not maybe vegetative material that can be recycled. You want to be able to make sure that you've got your hazardous materials segregated, so those go for proper disposal. White goods like refrigerators and washing machines and things like that can be recycled, and then your building debris, construction debris, and things like that are handled appropriately. And so we provide those approvals. We assess, inspect those sites to make sure they meet the criteria for siting locations. We give those temporary authorizations. And then we also conduct inspections throughout the process to make sure they're operated properly and stay in compliance with state rules and regulations. Landfills, we regulate the landfills, and so there's a lot of things that go into making sure the landfills are operating appropriately, they're accepting the right material, and then providing them with latitude to be able to maybe extend their hours or do the things that they need to do to be able to accommodate all the additional debris that's coming in during the disaster response. Hazardous materials response, and this is really a big part of what we do. After large hurricanes, there's a lot of hazardous materials that get displaced from storm surge, and that can wind up in the middle of a roadway on a public park in somebody's backyard. And so as we form up in teams and we go out with our other federal and state partners, we go out and we identify, locate these materials, assess the safety conditions of the material, spills, things of that nature, and then we designate teams to go out and respond and collect those materials and have them properly disposed of so that it's safe for the residents in those areas to be in those areas or to return to those areas after the hurricane. We also form a group that is available to respond out almost immediately following the hurricane to any type of hazmat events, releases, or spills. We have the U.S. Coast Guard that have the capabilities along the waterways, TCEQ and EPA and land, GLO also on the waterways, no spills, and we form that up into one key cohesive unit under a unified command. We track all those responses together and report those out and make sure we have that covered during the storm and immediately afterwards as well. Superfund sites, one of the areas that you always want to make sure those areas are covered. They're prepped before a storm comes in, and then we organize and send teams out to both the state and the federal sites to make sure that there are no issues, no compromise of the safety protocols or measures, engineering controls put in place at those facilities. And then assessing our regulatory, our commercial facilities, our refineries, our chemical plants, to make sure they don't have any spills or releases that need to be addressed. Also to make sure that they're, in some means, address any type of regulatory flexibility to make sure that they can do the things they need to do to help us respond to disasters. Things like providing fuel for responder vehicles to be able to go into areas and respond, so that the fire trucks have fuel to respond to the fires and so on. Things like that are very important. And then last but not least, make sure we conduct outreach with all of our local, state, federal partners to share regulatory guidance information and respond to any requests for assistance. On the second part of your question, how do we, what is the process for requests that would come in? Generally on a state level, just real quick, if a local entity, local government, county, have a need for assistance from the agency, they'll work that up through the county, local level to the state through our state operations center, who will then assign that out to an appropriate state agency to come and provide that assistance. At the federal level for assistance in the aftermath of a hurricane, we follow the Stafford Act on providing that financial assistance. We fill out the requests. It's called a mission assignment. We work with EPA ahead of time to be able to put that mission assignment together and what type of support we would need, dollar amount, boots on the ground equipment. That request is submitted to FEMA by way of the Texas Department. This is through TDEM, Division of Emergency Management, who acting as the state agent will approve that and send that on up to FEMA for approval. Then once approved, the mission assignment is then issued, and that basically allows EPA to come in and assist TCEQ on an established rate. Usually immediately after a storm, it's at 100%. There's usually a small period where everything is covered 100% by FEMA under the Stafford Act, and then thereon, usually at about a 75-25% split, where the state pays 25% on the mission assignment and the feds pay the 75%. We've been very successful in the past in being able to reduce the cost to the state of Texas for these types of responses. A little further than that, just another aspect is to capture the agency's costs during disaster response. That's really important to us to be able to capture that, record it, and then be able to apply for cost recovery for our emergency protective measures employed during the disaster, and to be able to get some of that money back for the state of Texas.
Ellie, thank you very much. What I discovered going through Hurricane Harvey is that this emergency response piece of what the agency does, it is a discipline unto itself. We are very familiar with the drill. We've got our professionals in place who are already coordinating ahead of time on a regular basis with our agency partners, and but there is quite a bit to it. And I know it's been a long meeting already, but I think when we're talking about hurricane response, it's really helpful to explain the scope of our responsibilities and provide some structure around that. So thank you for that explanation. Commissioner Lindley, any questions or comments on this hurricane topic?
No, I appreciate all the work that, like I said, has gone into it. I'm confident if we do get a storm, we'll handle it appropriately and be responsive as we always are.
Thank you. Commissioner Ginecka?
I don't think I could put it better there. It will be different, especially if we're dealing with additional pressures and alternate postures from the current pandemic. But I'm very confident knowing the level of confidence that we have internally, and this has been perhaps a good reminder to all of us that all crises and all natural disasters, man-made or otherwise, are come with significant upheaval. But I think it's a great reminder about the value of that recurring and frequent planning exercise. And I think that's probably the most important piece to our natural disasters or our responses in a crisis. I think we all always celebrate how well the agency responds, and I just want to take the opportunity to thank all the planners who are doing, tireless, less than glamorous work, thinking through all of these exhaustive iterative steps. And I'm really cautiously optimistic, but I, along with all the rest of my fellow Texans, I know we will all be serious and fearful of the potential for a hurricane or other natural disaster. So just look forward to looking to your leadership if and when that time should come.
Thank you, Commissioner Ginecka. Toby, do we have anything else, or?
No, Chairman. There's nothing else on our agenda.
Okay, well, I want to thank you, and again to our two Kellys, Kelly Keel Linden, thank you. Kelly Cook, thank you. Ramiro, L'Oreal, really appreciate the presentations. And to my colleagues, it's great to see your faces and to get to engage on this subject with you. I don't have any further closing remarks. Commissioner Lindley?
No, I appreciate. I think it was great to see and hear from everybody, and I look forward to the day we can all do it again in person. And just to comment on the fact that you can still continue to do business even if you're having technical problems, like me right now in this instance. So where there's a will, there's a way, and we need to continue operating as normal, as best as possible, whatever the new normal might mean. So I appreciate how difficult it is to telework. I am evident that technical problems exist, but there's also, you can get through it. So everyone that has issues, hang in there. We're all in it together.
We certainly are. Thank you, Commissioner Lindley. Commissioner Ginecka.
I really appreciate this opportunity. It's been a very, very useful exercise for me, and it was an exercise I was very quickly wanted to try to have, but at the start of the change in the agency's posture due to the COVID pandemic, and I was very sensitive to the possibility that it would have put an extra effort, an extra lift on staff's shoulders while they're already desperately distracted with other more important work. So I recognize that we did take some time to make sure that we had all of the immediate urgent fires working, but this has been really valuable for me, if for no other reason than to get to hear from my two colleagues, Chairman Neerman, Commissioner Lindley. I could not ask for a better opportunity to see directly where each of y'all are really working tirelessly in a little bit of an out-of-sight posture. This role is one that I'm continuing to try to adjust to and get better acquainted with, and I'm grateful for the opportunities to see where this return to office plan, the agency's efforts looking forward, are very directly informed by the engagement from both of y'all, and I'm really pleased with how well I've seen our agency's work products directly improved, and hearing from staff just this morning how the three of us directing our inquiries and attention really does have a direct response on the agency's role. But it's one that I'm I'm just very pleased with in terms of the level of competence and professionalism of the staff. So please, to all the staff who get a chance to watch this, it's like a little under 400 people watching on YouTube right now. I really am grateful for all the efforts going on from all across the state, and just want to encourage everyone to reach out to me if there's any random question or anything that I can help direct traffic on. I think it's a role we're all continuing to adjust to, but the process works. It's a little terrifying, all holding a different piece of that elephant and describing it from a different perspective at time. But I really am encouraged again by this morning how well the process can work. So please, everyone, I'll let you get back to work and keep it up.
Thank you, Commissioner Janeka. Ms. Smith, I think the only thing that's left on our noticed agenda is an executive session, and we will not be having an executive session today. So from the General Counsel's perspective, am I free to adjourn?
Yes, I don't think there's any reason to call item number 3. As you mentioned, it's for closed session, and you won't be meeting in closed session today.
All right. Well, thank you again to my fellow commissioners and to staff. The time is 12:22, and we are adjourned.
Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you.